Welcome to What is Going Om, for new thought from the edge of Om. Each week on OMTimes' flagship radio show, veteran broadcaster, author, and media consultant Sandie Sedgbeer conducts thought-provoking interviews with inspirational authors, artists, musicians, scientists, speakers, and filmmakers who are working at the point where spirituality and science meet consciousness at the very edge of Om. Here is your host, Sandie Sedgbeer.
Hello. Can we prove scientifically that God exists? Is heaven a hologram? Can we really create miracles? And how powerful is the power of your personal conviction? These are just some of the topics I'll be addressing today with lecturer and author Joseph Selbie, a founding member of Ananda, a global spiritual movement inspired by Paramahansa Yogananda, and a dedicated Kriya meditator for nearly 50 years. Joseph Selbie has helped hundreds of people awaken to their own spiritual potentials. He's also the author of the Yugas, a factual look at India's tradition of cyclical history, The Protector's Diaries, a sci-fi fantasy series inspired by the abilities of mystics, and The Physics of God, how the deepest theories of science explain religion, and how the deepest truths of religion explain science, which offer answers to some of the questions I've just posed. Joseph Selbie, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Good to have you, Joseph. Now, you're known for creating bridges of understanding between the modern evidence-based discoveries of science and the ancient experience-based discoveries of the mystics. But you've been a science lover all of your life. Indeed, you grew up in a family full of doctors and engineers and were on course to get a science degree when something happened that altered the course of your life. So tell us what that experience was.
Well, that experience was in the early 70s, an experience with hallucinogenic drug that was not my first, but that particular experience was so wonderful. As I like to say, it sort of introduced me to who I really wanted to be, who I potentially was when I could get out of my just mind and will and be present and feel the reality that I'm a part of. It was joyful. It was moving. It was peaceful. It was calm. It was everything I wanted, really. And so that pushed me into a completely new direction from sort of the hardcore sciences. And I got into philosophy. I got into beginning Western philosophy, and then gradually got deeper and deeper into Eastern philosophy, which took me to meditation. Western philosophy was a good process for kind of growing my mind's ability to understand more subtle concepts. But Western philosophy doesn't really give us any tools for changing our own state of awareness. It talks about higher states of awareness, but not how you get to them. Where Eastern spirituality is really all about experience, and meditation at its heart is what gives you that direct experience most easily. There are other ways that happens, obviously, to us, but meditation is a real core practice to have that kind of experience. And so in a way, you could say that I've spent the remainder of my life trying to live constantly in that experience that I had more or less accidentally through a drug. And that took me to Ananda, took me to my life that I have been living for really the last 50 years.
Well, it's interesting because in the Physics of God, you tell a little bit of your history and you talk about your family. And you mentioned that when you were young, dinner table conversations, if you were going to enter the conversation, you had to be prepared to quote the references. How did your family respond to you suddenly taking this U-turn?
Well, not well, but I wouldn't say badly. I had truly loving and supportive parents, but I think that they were bemused or confused that I could get into something that, they have no connection into, no experience of themselves. And amusingly, years after, I was having one of the weekly, monthly kind of calls that one has with one's parents, and they mentioned that one of my nieces or nephews or some relative had gotten into the 99th percentile in their group testing through something like SAT. And I said, oh, that's interesting. I was in the 99th percentile. And there was this long pause. And then my father said, jokingly, well, what the hell happened to you? So for them, the mind and, living a good life, a serviceful life, but certainly a life without any of this woo-woo spirituality was really what they understood.
So you're really, that there it is right there, the difference between the intellect, the science approach, the intellect and the actual experience. And you can't give somebody who's up here the experience because they've got to have it for themselves.
Yeah. You might get them interested in having the experience, but until they do, it's just theoretical.
So did any of your family ever get interested in having the experience after learning about your experiences?
I'd like to say yes, but I think the answer is no. I have good relationships with my siblings. Both my parents have now deceased. But their interest is more curiosity and a desire to have a relationship with their sibling. But none of them have really embraced it.
I understand. Yeah, I think there's many people who could say the same thing. Yeah. So in your book, The Physics of God, you suggest that the philosophy of scientific materialism is wrong and that the existence of God is scientifically verifiable. Tell me more about that.
Well, science is king, and scientific materialism, which is really a belief system within the scientific community, is also king. And it's a belief system because it basically rules out the possibility of more subtle realities that aren't just grounded in measurable energy and matter. And so most people would say or believe that science is impartial, that science is open to wherever the facts lead them. But it's not actually the case that, if you try to venture into measuring consciousness or understanding how there could be subtle realities surrounding us that aren't grounded in measurable energy and matter, you get a cold shoulder in today's scientific community. And that is because there is this hardcore belief that that's really all there is, and that any other pursuit, however open-minded, is a fool's errand and a waste of time. So while they appear to have this open mind, they really are closed to the exploration of more subtle reality.
Well, it's a religion, isn't it, in itself?
Yeah, it's a belief system.
Absolutely.
Siri knows many things.
I think Siri is agreeing with me according to my watch. I don't know if you heard that.
The omnipresent Siri spoke.
Yes, absolutely. So you say that there is a religion of science and an underlying science to religion. Tell me about the science of religion then.
Well, we touched on it. The heart of the science of religion is direct experience. So again, probably many people would think that there's no particular science to spiritual experience. It just kind of happens that you're lucky, or like I had an experience through a hallucinogenic drug. But there really is much more of a science to trying to achieve those kind of experiences than most people realize. And the heart of it is meditation. And the heart of meditation is becoming sufficiently still that you're no longer bombarded by sensation from the body, and to focus the mind so you're no longer just following the 1,000,001 trains of thought that tend to come to us when we try to meditate. And as those two deepen, stillness and more of an inward focus that's not just on your thoughts, you naturally begin to experience subtle realities. Most people experience it initially as just deep relaxation. It's like a letting go. And I liken it to the kind of experience you might have on the seventh day of a 7-day vacation, that you finally have become detached enough from all the things that you left behind at home. And on that 7th day, you're finally going, whoa, this is wonderful. We should come back. We should do this more often. We've all said these things. But really what you're saying is it's wonderful not to be inundated by all of those thoughts and all of the sort of compulsions that those thoughts bring. Meditation can give you that 1-week vacation every time you do it. You can come to that feeling of all's right with the world, all's right with yourself, everything is unfolding as it should, and that happiness, well-being, peace of mind, they're all within. They don't have anything to do with what's going on around you. And you can go deeper and deeper into that until you discover the reason you feel that way is that you're getting in contact with your God nature, with God, with your soul, with who you really are on a subtle level. And that connection is transformative. It's powerful.
Yeah, I want to come back to meditation a bit later because I've read lots of books about meditation. I've tried many different types of meditation, but there's something at the end of your book that got my attention in a whole other way. So I want to mention that a bit later. But for now, tell us about, you talk about the world around us being a light show, an illusion. And tell us how that, why is it an illusion and how can it affect the average person?
Well, I mainly put it in the book just to underscore that we have a subtle reality, or that our innate nature is beyond the physical world. But it's helpful, I think, for people to be able to embrace that when they realize that the physical world isn't that real. Or, as I like to say, it isn't what it seems. So you've probably heard, and many people have quoted this over the years, that if you eliminated all the space in all the atoms in an individual body, you would be left with a bit of matter the size of the head of a pin. we are mostly empty space. The body is mostly the vast interstellar space in our galaxy, only on a miniature level. That there are huge distances between the atom and the orbiting electrons. And it's those orbiting electrons that sort of create a little, like force field, so that different atoms or atoms forming into molecules don't crush into each other down to the point of the nucleus, touching a nucleus, but instead maintain this huge volume of, relatively proportionally huge volume of empty space. And so not only are our bodies mostly empty space, all of reality as we see it through the senses is empty space as well. Take this out to a huge level, and you could say that the amount of actual matter in the entire universe is probably something you could put into a bucket. The rest of it, empty space, and then even what's in the bucket is itself made of energy. So everything, whether it's the nuclei of atoms in our body or in the entire universe, they too are all energy vibrating at different frequencies, whirling in ultra rapid motion around a center point, however you want to describe it. There is no there. There is no ultimately tiny balls of matter that can be compressed no more. They just don't even exist. So matter itself is not at all what it seems. So it's an illusion. So knowing that these physical bodies that seem so real to us, and at times we feel like we're, maybe dragging them around, or they're ill, or in some way getting in the way of what we would like to be doing, it's good to remember that they too are not what they seem, that our experiences with the physical body are much different even than what we think.
Nothing is what it seems, is it?
No.
You've said that most of what we are exists beyond the physical universe, and that we live simultaneously in two realms, one physical and one subtle. So explain a bit more about that to me.
Well, subtle realms, for any of your listeners, and probably many or most of them have encountered this through experiential spiritual teachings, is the notion that we have subtle bodies, that we exist simultaneously in these two bodies, one of which is pure energy, and the other is the physical body that we perceive through the senses, and that they work seamlessly together. But there is support for this also in physics, that primarily comes to us through the concept of non-locality. So non-locality is potentially a confusing subject for people, because the word non-locality sounds unfamiliar and perhaps counterintuitive. But in physics, what they have discovered, particularly in quantum physics and in string theory, is that the majority of the energy that supports the structure of the universe, and therefore supports the structure of our physical bodies, doesn't exist in the three local dimensions that we're familiar with in our everyday life. Height, width, length. Those dimensions, they're really describing space. This is the way in which our senses have been trained to operate, is perceiving matter within space. And those three dimensions are the one most familiar to us. But because we have this subtle body that is actually supporting our physical body, it exists non-locally. We can't perceive it with the senses, but it is there. And some disciplines within physics go even farther with that concept and say that there is an entire realm that is non-local. And within that realm, there are what they call brains, or layers of energy that are layers because each layer is at a higher frequency or lower frequency than the other. And that these brain layers kind of stack up on each other. The lowest frequency level first, and then stacking up to the highest frequency level. And this is M theory for people who are familiar with this, but it matches extraordinarily well, M theory does, the notion of the heavens that are found in every religion in the world. And they're found in every religion in the world because the saints and sages and the founding saviors of those religions all had direct experience of the heavens. And they all described the heavens as being layered, that there are lower heavens and higher heavens. We have the term the seventh heaven that you hear periodically. The Buddhist heavens have more than most layers. They might have 10, they might have 20, depending on which discipline. The Hindus have 7 layers of heaven, but even Christians have the third heaven, even the seventh heaven in some descriptions. So this notion of layered heavens, each one being more subtle and more significant to spiritual understanding than the one before, is also true of every concept of the heavens that you find in the different religions. So this is to me was an exciting and amazing connection between M theory and the teachings of experiential spirituality. So what this comes down to for us in terms of, what does it mean? How does it help us in any real way is, I think most importantly for us to realize that most of what we are, most of who we are is non-local. Most of who we are exists in the subtle aspect of ourselves. And that most includes our thoughts, our emotions, our memories, our motivations, our will. This is all non-local. This is all astral. Non-local, astral, same thing, same concept. Just come at one from science and one from experience. So what this means in a variety of ways, most simply perhaps, is that when we die, we lose the physical body, but we remain in the astral body. We remain in the subtle body. And so we will have the same thoughts. We will have the same emotions. We will have the same memories when we die. And that's wise, because none of those things are in the physical world to begin with. So we can't lose them at death. They don't exist in the 3 dimensions of this spatial world we live in. So that relationship between subtle body and physical body is really kind of at the heart of all experiential spiritual teachings.
Yeah. This is something, you've kind of connected some dots for me because, we hear time and time again, nobody can find consciousness in the brain. They're not entirely sure, that our memories exist in the brain. So where do they exist? And people are saying, yes, it's non-local, but nobody has said to me anyway that this subtle body is where they reside. That part of us, that astral self, if you like. I had a conversation with Amit Goswami a few weeks ago, and he was talking about the two selves, which I think are different than what you're talking about, the two bodies, because one of the selves he was talking about was the ego. What would you say the self is?
Well, I think the self is even beyond the subtle body. The self is our identity with God. So we are godlike within that permanent, immortal connection we have to God. And so, of course, it brings up the question, well, what is God? What am I saying God is? God is infinite consciousness, infinite joy, infinite love, beyond form. So you could say that we are God's masquerading in form. The powers that allow us to manifest our physical bodies come from God, but the actual physical bodies we manifest come from our own convictions. So we're constantly using God's powers to be and express what we are and what we can be, but we're limiting what that can be temporarily from our own conceptions. So, and I think one of our own conceptions, perhaps to tie this into what Amit was talking about, is a sense of ego. Paramahansa Yogananda defined ego quite simply as the conviction that you are separate from God. So as long as we have the conviction that we're separate, and convictions aren't simply an idea we have or something we read. Convictions are really beyond the conscious mind's ability to tap into. They're part of that subtle body. They're part of that core of who we are. That then in turn manifests as the bodies that we have, the state of health we have, the kind of goals we have, the person we have. Those all come from these deeply held convictions. And that all, for the most part, comes from this, is led from the conviction that we are separate, that our day-to-day experience, my day-to-day experience, is that I'm separate from God. I believe that it's not true. I've had experiences that were so uplifting, and in the moment of those, I could say, obviously there's no separation. But then I come down from those experiences and I behave as if I'm separate again. So that's ego. The ego is this massive, intricate conviction that we have that we are anything but the divine.
Yeah. I want to come back to convictions after, because that is such an important part of your book and such an important thing that we need badly to grasp, because that's the way we're going to change the world. So we're going to go to a short break now. You're listening to What Is Going On. I'm Sandie Sedgbeer, and I'm speaking with lecturer and author Joseph Selbie about his book, The Physics of God, How the Deepest Theories of Science Explain Religion, and How the Deepest Truths of Religion Explain Science. We'll be back with more from Joseph Selbie after the break.
OMTimes TV. Imagine becoming a super influencer. Reinvent yourself, invest in your brand, and then manifest your success with a robust spheric approach. OMTimes Media and Broadcasting offers a unique and multifaceted way to become the spiritual and conscious influencer you deserve to be by putting your message across our powerful platform with its proven record of integrity and excellence. Through our produced shows, OMTimes offers the opportunity to become a social media TV personality, a radio show host, an OMTimes magazine columnist, and a syndicated podcaster, all in one shot. By live streaming your show on OMTimes TV and broadcasting it across the extensive OMTimes radio and TV networks, you become more than a host. You become an ambassador and a force for positive change. OMTimes. Open yourself to the possibilities.
If I could be you, and you could be me for just 1 hour. If we could find a way to get inside each other's minds. Walk a mile in my shoes. Walk a mile in my shoes. Well, before you abuse, criticize, and accuse. Walk a mile in my shoes.
Welcome back, Joseph Selbie. The physics of God. You write in there about how both the saints and science tell us that without knowing how we do it, we are performing an astonishing miracle every moment of every hour of every day. We're continuously creating our own physical body. You then go on to talk about how, people are just beginning to discover that thought, can actually change their lives and can change physical things, can change their emotions, can change, we hear about people having, miraculous remissions from cancer or disappearances of cancer. You go further and you give us more information in the book about how our own personal conviction can even change our physiology. So tell us a little bit about that, because I think that is a fascinating subject.
Well, to explain it from science first, I had already mentioned earlier in the show that M theory is one of the disciplines of physics, particularly of string theory, that posits that there are these layers of energy existing non-locally that support the entire structure of the physical universe. But M theory goes one step further, which is that they posit that the entire physical universe is a holographic projection from this non-local system of energy, and that the information that creates the physical universe exists in this non-local reality, not in the physical world, that the natural laws that underpin the way in which the universe was created and unfolds actually are part of the templates, if you will, that exist in this non-local pure energy realm. So this is, one of the things that goes around and around in articles that I see all over that leaves people sort of gasping, the notion that the entire physical universe is a holographic projection. The notion that what is being projected is a light show illusion, that it's made of energy and mostly space, makes it, I think, a little easier to understand how that projection could work and why it's not such a stretch that a pure energy realm could project energy into a, three-dimensional realm that includes this illusory experience of matter. Where this connects with us manifesting our own body is that we too, if we look at ourselves only as physical bodies, are holographic projections. So just sit with that for a moment, that your body is being projected from another realm, and that the information that creates the body as you see it is coming from that realm as well. And that this physical body is part of that light show illusion, that we are mostly empty space, and that what isn't empty space is pure energy. So then put that together with the notion of our astral body being a perfect template for the physical body. And science provides us the mechanism for how the astral body projects the physical body. So it's happening all the time. It's a continuous projection of the physical body. So where does the information come from then? So in M theory, they're saying the information just exists in a very nebulous way in this non-local realm. But if the non-local realm, as the saints and sages tell us, is full of the heavens, then I believe the heavens are the template for the physical world. And you see this in many spiritual teachings, sort of summarized in the phrase, as above, so below, that there is this higher ordered, intelligently ordered reality that then manifests the physical world, which is, by that sort of definition, a little bit of a lower order, if you will. The physical world is not quite as perfect as these higher realms. So too with our physical body is not quite as perfect because it's physical as our astral body is. Our astral body is this perfect template. But our soul powers, our innate connection to God, allows us to alter that perfect template however we wish, or however we are determined. Wish sounds too ephemeral. It really has to come down to convictions, as we've touched on earlier, that this is how we look, this is how we are. And there's an amazing way for that notion to be seen in the area of multiple personality disorder. So this is one of the areas I find endlessly fascinating, that most people know that people with multiple personality disorder have these distinct personalities that can be very different from one personality to the other. But most people don't realize is that when one personality changes out and another comes in, there are sometimes physiological changes that happen. So some personalities, when they come in, will bring with them moles or scars that the previous personality did not have. Some personalities are left-handed while others are right-handed. Some personalities need glasses. You can't see without glasses. One woman who had 10 personalities had a purse full of glasses because each personality had a different prescription. This was measured by opticians who had the opportunity to measure someone's complete set of optical characteristics as each of 10 different personalities came and went. And they found that each sets of eyes, if you will, of each different personality were strongly to subtly different, including that some of them had different eye color than others. So how is this even remotely possible? Because it happens instantaneously. And I think it tells us the answer to that, because each one of those personalities came in with the complete conviction that that's what they looked like, with the complete conviction that they needed glasses, or that they had moles in certain places or scars in certain places. So we don't see this as dramatically in our day-to-day life, but we're doing the same thing, is that we're manifesting the convictions that we have through this mechanism of the astral body projecting the physical body, and we do it continuously.
I trained in hypnotherapy many years ago, and my teacher told us many stories where he had demonstrated this kind of thing, where he had put somebody in a trance, brushed a feather along their arm, told them it was a cigarette, and they got blisters.
Yeah.
And another person, he took them back to a time when their eyesight was really good and said, now I'm going to bring you forward to the present, but we're going to take your eyesight from that time with you. And he said that person no longer needed to wear glasses. So, I mean, there is so much evidence of this.
Yeah. Yeah. You're working more directly with people's convictions through that kind of process than you can just by talking about it at a conscious level.
Yeah. Didn't Yogananda, I think, in his autobiography, tell the story about his sister or a family relative who was quite overweight? And, they said she'd never get married or something. And he said that, I think he talked to her, and the next day she came down and her body was a completely different size and shape.
Yeah, was actually the opposite, is that she was very skinny.
Oh, the other way around. Okay.
Which in India was, an undesirable trait, unlike, the American or European sort of svelte model of beauty. In India, at that time, this was admittedly a long time ago, women being plump was pleasing. So his sister despaired of ever being attractive to her husband, was an arranged marriage, but he had no interest in her, as it was put in delicately in the book. And as you say, he prayed for her and told her that tomorrow you'll have whatever body you want. And indeed it happened. So that the power of that prayer changed her convictions, and in changing her convictions, she became the pleasingly plump woman she always wanted to be.
Well, isn't it interesting that I turned it the other way around, as the conviction today is
Yes.
that, slender is better.
Yep.
Yeah. That is just astonishing. But, it is evidence that we literally can create miracles if we believe that we can.
Yeah.
The question is, how do we change our convictions? How do we get to that point where we are convinced that we can?
Well, I think there's a lot of answers to that. And some of them are, expressed through various systems, like you mentioned, hypnotherapy. And there's a wide variety of approaches to hypnotherapy, as you no doubt know. But I think at the core, what the conviction that we all should be trying to change is that we're separate from God. If we can make headway on that and feel more and more a connection to God, it empowers us on so many levels and changes our convictions on so many levels. And the core way to do that is meditation.
Yeah.
I don't want to push aside other techniques like chanting and devotional practices. I think those are sort of part and parcel of the meditation experience. But I don't think there's any substitute for becoming perfectly still, bringing your mind to a focus, and releasing this temporary experience that we're having of being a body and experiencing what happens when we go beyond that. And what we experience is just wonderful, and it's expansive, and it's loving, and it's joyful, it's energizing, it's clarifying. The more we have that, the more we have the conviction that that truly is who and what we are. I had a recent experience. I had an automobile accident, and I never lost consciousness. I didn't have any kind of near-death experience. But after almost 50 years of meditating, what I found is I had absolutely no fear. I knew I was hurt. I knew they were going to get me in an ambulance. I knew I was going to be going to the hospital. I knew something could be happening. I might get operated on. I might, lose capabilities, none of which actually happened, thankfully. I did have to go through some rehab, but regardless of what actually happened, in the end, what I experienced as it happened was I felt completely safe. I didn't have any fearful reactions to what if, or, what if I can't, or what if this gets worse. I just felt safe. I felt like no matter what happened, because I have that conviction that I am a soul, that I am immortal, that this is just one passing show, and there'll probably be another one in a future incarnation, but it's just a passing show. And if I have to leave it, I leave it. If I stay in it, I stay in it. But I felt safe in any of those possibilities. And I had to really think afterwards and consider that was probably unusual, that most people's reaction probably would have been to be fearful. And I really, attribute that to thousands, many, many experiences within meditation, of feeling myself connected to the divine. And that conviction, the conviction that's born of that experience, affected all my other convictions about, what was a good thing to be happening.
Yeah, I agree with you. Absolutely. When people are regressed and accessing what they think are past lives, would you say that what they're tapping into there is all of the knowledge and information that is stored in the astral self, if you like, as opposed to that's what's happening? Those memories are there, and that's what they're tapping into. They're connecting with that at that point.
Yeah. Well, talking about how people experience things in the astral regions is fascinating to me. And we get a lot of that testimony from saints and sages, but we also, in our modern times, get a lot of testimony about that from near-death experiencers. And one of the things that they often say is that time doesn't progress in the astral regions the way it does for us in our physical world, that time is experienced differently. Anita Moorjani, whose wonderful near-death experience was put in the book Dying to Be Me, said that when she was being prepared to return to this life that she had left, she was aware that a part of her was simultaneously being prepared for a future life. So it confounds the mind, confounds the way we think about reality, because in this non-dual, non-local, pure energy astral realm, there is no space and there is no time. And so all of the knowledge that exists in these realms, you can think of them as accessing this infinite hoard of memory, or you can think of it as actually experiencing something that happened in the past or might happen in the future. Knowing and experiencing, I don't think there's any real meaningful separation from those two concepts when you talk about our existence in these higher realms.
I want to talk about meditation a little bit here, because you share some very detailed information about how to meditate, along with the technique of concentration called Hong-Sau, which you say will likely result in us seeing light. And this got my attention because I've tried many different ways to meditate, and I've never really felt that I've got anywhere with it. But yours excited me because it seemed to offer a process to really allow one to go deep. So tell me a little bit about Hong-Sau.
Well, as I mentioned a couple of times already, that the kind of two keys to having deep meditations are sitting still, which is, a challenge, but I think a more approachable challenge for people. They realize that, they just have to learn to sit in a position that allows them to become still. And if they have, any kind of tensions or discomfort, that it might be a good idea to do things like yoga postures before they sit. So I think it's more approachable to tell people to, learn to sit still. But telling people to focus the mind is less approachable, because we've all had the experience, and I had it myself in meditation this morning, of the mind wanting to just run down all of the topics that are something I'm involved with. I do a lot of writing, so I have to avoid the temptation to write while I meditate, instead of meditating, to be thinking about what I'm going to write, what I'm going to say, how I'm going to say it, because my mind wants to do it. And so the most simple approaches to meditation, mindfulness being, a very, very popular one today, teach you to just let the thoughts come and let the thoughts go. Don't get engaged in them. And I think that it can be effective, but I have found that I still get caught up in the thoughts. Just watching them, I just want to think about them. I love thinking is the problem. Whereas the Hong-Sau technique of concentration, sort of takes that tendency that we all have and tells us to concentrate on something specific rather than just letting your thoughts come and go. And in the case of the Hong-Sau technique, it is to watch the breath. So just watch yourself breathing. And as you breathe in, you say mentally hung. And as you breathe out, you say mentally saw. It's not a magic bullet, but it's extremely helpful. You'll still find that your mind runs off and forgets that you're doing the Hong-Sau technique, forgets that you're watching the breath and saying hung and saw. But if you can stay with it and learn to do it, it is, in my experience, the most effective way of finally having that focus where your other thoughts are no longer invading and carrying you off. Not an easy thing to achieve right off, but it is achievable with this technique. And when you reach that point where you're, as Yogananda would say, you're going beyond thought, you're going beyond this constant stream of thoughts, or as Michael Singer calls it, the annoying roommate that's constantly talking in your mind. When you get beyond that, then you naturally see things like light, and you naturally feel joy, and you naturally feel yourself to be much greater than you ever knew. So the Hong-Sau technique is really all about methodically getting past your thoughts. You can't suppress your thoughts. You can't just make them go away because you want them to go away, because then you'll be thinking about making them go away, right? It's always with you if you try to use the mind that way. But if you use the mind to focus on something else, and that something else naturally takes you deeper into focus, then you have a much better chance of getting beyond the mind.
I particularly was attracted to the idea of focusing on the breathing, the breath coming out of the nose, the feeling of that, and then gradually taking it up to the point there. I could see that for somebody like me, very much as you describe yourself, that would be a great way of distracting my mind and giving it something else to focus on until it eventually reaches a point where it doesn't need that because it's experiencing something else. Yeah. The book, it does a brilliant job of connecting the dots and telling us the how. What about the why? Why? Why do we do this? Why, as a, this multidimensional being, this, energy, why do we choose to come into some kind of third dimension and take on a physical body?
That's the big question. That's why with a capital W. And I don't think there are any answers that I've ever heard that are just pat, and you say, that finally got it. The answer that I'm most familiar with is that God created all of us so that he could enjoy himself through many, or she could enjoy himself through many. God is genderless, or all genders, if you want. And that as children of God, as the creations of God, we are godlike, and that I sort of almost see it. It's almost like he flung us out from himself only to enjoy us making our way back to him. As other people have pointed out, it doesn't really always seem like we're enjoying the process of coming back to God. And that's why I have never found an explanation that is deeply satisfying for why God created us, or why, if we're godlike, it's so difficult for us to recall and remember and to become that again. The only thing I can say is what ultimately Yogananda said is, save some questions for eternity, that just move forward into greater awareness, move forward into greater joy, move forward into greater peace. And ultimately you'll understand experientially rather than mentally why.
Yeah. I've never bought we're here to learn, because if we are sparks of God, then we don't need to learn. We just need to experience.
Or we need to learn to experience. You can use that both ways. The mind is a really powerful tool. It's not the ultimate expression of what we can experience, but it's a really powerful tool. You just have to, deal with its shortcomings and use its strengths.
Yeah. Joseph Selbie, I wish we had more time to discuss more, but I'm afraid we're out. I really, really enjoyed your book and will heartily recommend it to anybody. Thank you for joining us today.
My pleasure.
So, The Physics of God, How the Deepest Theories of Science Explain Religion and How the Deepest Truths of Religion Explain Science is published by New Page Books, a division of Red Will Weiser. And for more information about Joseph Selbie, his books and work, visit physicsforgod.com and I believe expandinglight.org. That's one of your sites, is it?
Actually, you can find me that way, but it's not my site. So the best way is the physicsandgod.com. That will really bring people.
Okay, Joseph Selbie, thank you. Well, that brings us to the end of this week's show. I'm Sandie Sedgbeer, and I'll be back at the same time next week with another edition of What is Going On. Till then, it's goodbye from me.